Whether we're looking at contrast paints, speed paints, or any of the multitude of similar paints, we're told they're an easy, one-step method. But are they? Maybe there's a better way that's even faster. Welcome back to Caffeinated Miniatures. With the release of the new, incredible Flesh Eater Quartz sculpts, I've been pretty hyped to paint some ghouls. Of course, the official Warhammer sculpts from Games Workshop have been tough to come by, so I found these cool STL files from Immaterium God Miniatures, and printed what I thought would be a good block of them for Age of Sigmar. Yeah, we've got 40 of these dudes to paint up. And with 40 of them to paint up, I thought it'd be a good time to revisit the Speed Paint 2.0 range from the Army Painter. Bright base coats like white or bright gray are always recommended for these paints. So that's where I started, spraying them with Pro Acryl white primer. Okay, so I'll do these next steps with an airbrush, but if you don't have one, don't worry. I'll do the exact same thing with a brush later on. For the past several months, I've really enjoyed experimenting with color and underpainting, and did not want to lose that here. Grabbing Malignant Green, I sprayed most of the model, particularly focusing on the front and upward-facing surfaces. Then reaching for Murder Scene, a particularly suitable color for these ghouls. Then mostly sprayed this from below into the downward-facing and shadowy areas, creating an interesting contrast between light and shadow. It's okay to have a pretty stark difference between these colors, as they'll be unified in the next step. With these very transparent paints, it makes the most sense to start with the lightest or brightest color, as that bright color won't reach full opacity or vibrancy over top of the darker color. And this is a really highly transferable method, so whichever paints you're using, whatever colors you're using, I'd start with the brightest. After getting some basic color down, I needed to add some more contrast and definition in the recesses. So I grabbed Desolate Brown and Speed Paint Medium and began thinning the Desolate Brown down pretty heavily, about 3 parts medium to 1 part paint. Then grabbing a big old brush, I mopped this mix onto the whole of the mini. This quickly and easily adds contrast and unifies the first colors. As an added bonus, it requires 0 skill. Perfect for knocking out a pile of your chaff minis in very short order. Now for some of those smaller details. There were some metal bits on a few of these creepers, so Broadsword Silver to the rescue. I do not normally mess around with metallic paints. I just haven't found any that I really like, but for the sake of expediency, I used the new Broadsword Silver speed paint here. And I gotta say, I really didn't mind it. Then keeping with the speed paint theme, I went back to Murder Scene, diluting it about 1:1 with speed paint medium. I applied it to all of the open wound looking spots. At this point you could absolutely call these guys done and get them on the table, but I wanted to pick out a few more highlights and details. The goal was to keep the painting time per mini to under 10 minutes, so high contrast is the name of the game, and importantly, achieving that contrast in a single layer. For those fleshy bits, I reached for Shadow Flesh. I didn't dilute this at all and roughly applied some highlights, hitting edges and high points, primarily using the side of my brush. I didn't want to make these areas too bright, I just wanted to remove the green highlights that were already there. In order to apply these highlights in a single layer, it's important to keep the full opacity of the paint, not diluting it at all. Now I'm using Pro Acryl, which is pretty thin right out of the bottle. Different paints from different manufacturers may need slight diluting, so your mileage may vary. Happy with those red bits, I moved on to the bones and spikes. I mixed in a small amount of light umber into ivory. Again, I didn't dilute this at all and just smashed on some highlights. I want these ghastly fellas to look good in big blocks on the table, not a few inches from the face. So adding some high contrast highlights where the light would hit was the most important thing. At this point, I realized there was a bunch of hair to paint. However, before we get to that, let's paint one of these guys up strictly with the brush. Like with the airbrush, we want to start with the lightest color, in this case, Malignant Green, leaving the downward facing areas alone. Quickly swapping to Murder Scene, I'll slap more color into those previously missed areas. A benefit of this method on these particular dudes is we can hit these open wound bits at the same time. I gave this about 15 minutes to dry, enough time to be dry to the touch, but not to avoid reactivation, as I wanted the next step to slightly combine with the bottom layers. Just as I had with the first method, I diluted Desolate Brown with Speed Paint Medium. Then, with that same large brush, I mopped it all over the entire mini. From this point, everything is done in the exact same manner as before. I did, however, let this dry for more than an hour to prevent the reactivation of the bottom layers. Going back to the hair, I first went with Gravelord Grey. I wasn't quite happy with it. It needed to be a bit darker. So grabbing Grim Black, I wrapped up all the hair. With that, quick victory lap around each base rim, and we can call these 40 ghoulies done. Well, there you go. 40 ghouls done in about 6 hours, which is less than 10 minutes per mini. And most importantly, I enjoyed the process. Underpainting with fun colors has massively transformed my relationship with painting, and this method really plays with that. Also, I think it's quite transferable. Use it to paint your orcs or your space marines. Actually, I think it would work super well with Tyranids. What do you think? Is this something you want to try? Or is there another quick method that you enjoy using? Let me know in the comments below. And if you do give it a shot, tag me on Instagram, as I would love to see it. As always, if you made it this far, you are an absolute champion. If you liked the video, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more mediocre hobby content. And thanks for watching. You are awesome, and I'll see you in the next one.